I actually fired Santa one year because he was smoking and had to hire a new Santa.
That might be sacrilegious.
Yeah. So, a lot of, but what an adventure, I ran a PRCA rodeo for that first chamber, and, put the wrong cow on and got chewed out by some folks. But, just learned. I mean, just kept learning and learning and learning, and then had a column in a newspaper. And, every step along the way, it was like one new life experience after another. And so for me, for somebody who likes studying people, who likes learning, it was just this environment of just constant learning and constant growth. And lo and behold, I found out I was good at it.
Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together.
Although it's not the last time. Phyllis, it's so great to have you on the podcast today. What I know of you, and really the identity I know of you, is you are a true public servant of the community. And I'm really excited to unfold that story for our guest today. So grateful to have you here.
Well, I'm excited to be here, Austin. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to walk through your career path, what I think is so interesting and really illuminates your character and your heart for people. And I want to start with really when that started. Because from the way I understand it, you had a vision in college of what career would look like, and then there was a pivot. So talk us through kind of how that path was formed.
Yeah, well, I had a few visions in college. I thought I wanted to be a nurse, and then quickly disbanded that when I got to chemistry. Loved marketing, but nobody was getting a job in marketing when I was getting out. So I pivoted to accounting and got a degree. And if it weren't for this lovely tax accounting professor who told me I would never make it as a CPA, I probably wouldn't have graduated with that accounting degree. But I was so determined at that point that I got it, and I show him, whoever he was, because I can't remember his name. And I did that for about 15 years. It was one of the best learning experiences I ever had. It put me in corporate America, and growing up in a small town, blue collar family, no one had ever gone to college. Like, it just exposed me to people and situations and things that I wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So it was a real gift. But at the same time, it was not what I wanted to do the rest of my life.
What were you learning about your wiring, your enjoyments, passions, and what makes you tick professionally during that time? That's a long clip. And so you were picking up things that were your wheelhouse, that maybe were less of that, as well as enjoyments. What were you noticing, and what was that process like?
Yeah, I think maybe it was the era in which I graduated, but I was just thrilled to have a job that paid well. And and this was a time when public accounting was a real grind. I mean, there was a 6-month period towards the end where I worked over 80 hours a week. So for 6 straight months, just really intense project. And the thing was, they would hire people and figure 90% of them would leave in 3 years. And so it was kind of like they were intentionally weeding people out, and they successfully weeded me out. I successfully made it to senior and said, I can't do this. But I kept taking other positions, a controller of a small real estate company, and a position with FDIC when all the banks and savings and loans were failing. I would take things that I didn't feel qualified for, almost out of desperation, because I didn't grow up in a professional family. I didn't really have good role models. I didn't know what else to do. Like, I had this training now. I felt like I had to do this the rest of my life. But where I would be successful was when I would be offered a leadership role, or where I would be given the gift of being able to have influence over a project. I could see things that maybe other people couldn't see, but just the daily grind that was required and the detail orientation, probably not my best skill set. So what did I do? I decided to leave FDIC after a certain period, after 8 years, and start my own firm, which makes absolutely no sense since I had already determined I didn't like accounting. But I didn't know what else to do. So I hung up a shingle and spent 2 years doing work I really didn't enjoy, full time. Not even, I had gotten to a point where I had other people working for me, and I had, gotten into leadership, had moved out of doing the day-to-day, and I was back down in it, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is not the escape route I thought it would be. But an incredible experience to start my own company. Incredible experience to be an entrepreneur. I mean, it was a lot of learning, painful. But don't ever start a business doing something you don't like doing. That is not a good plan. So I found myself volunteering a lot during that time period, because the volunteering was more fun than what I was doing that I wasn't enjoying, that was actually paying the bills. And through the volunteering, I eventually became aware of a position for a small chamber of commerce, a small nonprofit organization that needed a new leader. Their leader had left, and it was a little bit broken and messed up, and they wanted to do something completely different, and we're like, oh, well, maybe she could help. And the finances were a mess, which is often the case in a nonprofit that's broken, is usually the finances are part of the problem. So they also figured she can probably also fix the books. And so, and I was so desperate. I would do anything besides what I was doing. So I was like, that sounds like a great idea. It doesn't pay anything, but the kids are young. They won't know I'm poor. So I took the job, and I loved it. That began a 30-year course of leading nonprofits.
Wow. Something I love about that is that the discovery process was just getting out and serving.
It was.
And saying, how can I contribute to the community? I've got this, job I was doing as an accountant, and now I've got a business doing it, and it's not maybe life-giving or giving me what I'm hoping for in terms of fulfillment. How can I give? I think that's particularly impressive, because in a season like that, the natural tendency, and I know I've had seasons like this, is to go inward and think, oh, I have nothing to give, I'm so drained, and to be quite self-focused. So I really admire you looking outward and looking for a place to plug in. And it's amazing that one of those orgs, noticed you, and that value was noticed and picked up. Along the way, were there people in your world, friends, mentors that were helping you on this path? I mean, you had a powerful sense of ambition, persistence, were a real self-starter. What were the inputs of that journey that really, helped you make these hard decisions, work like you did? What was your support structure like?
That's interesting. I didn't have a huge support structure, and so probably part of that was just that tenacity. Like at that point, I had 3 small children. They needed to eat. I needed to feed them, and so I knew I had responsibilities, and I needed to bring in a level of income. I frankly, I mean, on paper it looks like I had it all together, and I had this like tremendous plan to get where I was going. But the truth of the matter is, I stumbled for 2 years, and I soul searched, and there was a lot of crying and a lot of tears, and there weren't a lot of great books and podcasts, and I saw no examples of how to do this well. So, but I was always somebody who watched people. And coming from an environment where I didn't have role models, and I didn't have people that were doing the kinds of things I innately felt like that's where I ought to be, I just started looking at people that were good at doing things. Like I would look at people that were really good at fundraising in some of these nonprofits that I was volunteering in. And I would just like ask them if I could follow them along, to an event they were going to, or they were fundraising, or they were asking for money. And really just watch how they work the room. And from my very first job on, I was a real good studier of people. Eventually I got studying books when there were more books written on the topic. And I mean, I remember when Who Moved My Cheese Out? That was like the big, or the revolutionary new book, or Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I remember that coming out. That was a big deal. But just finding role models, finding people that were doing certain things well, and trying to figure out what is it they've got that I don't have. Like, how could I do that? And learn. And one of them was I pretty soon figured out if I wanted to do more of this kind of thing, I needed to speak more in public. And 15 years in public accounting had not prepared me for speaking publicly. So I started like, how am I going to do that? And so I volunteered to be a lector at my church. And I had a shaky voice every Sunday when I would stand up and do that. Or I I got in Toastmasters, which was a big thing then, and practiced speaking, and public speaking, and took speaking engagements anywhere I could get them. And so I just kept putting myself, one of the early concepts I learned was just to expand my level of comfort, I had to push into a lot of things I was uncomfortable with. And as you do that, that circle of comfort keeps expanding, and you find yourself, you look back a year later, and the thing that you were super uncomfortable with, you're now more comfortable doing. And so that's kind of something I've carried with me my whole life, is just like lean into the thing I'm uncomfortable doing until I become comfortable doing it.
I really admire that. And, the natural tendency as humans is to seek comfort. You were doing the opposite, seeking discomfort, but that's where growth exists. And I think, I'm hearing that you experienced that powerfully. And something else that you said that I think is a wonderful outlook is you became a student of people. If we look out at anyone who has become excellent, noteworthy, or world leading in any domain, athlete, business, whatever it may be, they become a student of it. If you want to be the best bowler in the world, you become a student of bowling, of the sport. And you became a student of people. And, the best leaders out there, they're students of people. So I really appreciate that. Bring us back to the chamber. And first tell people what the function of a chamber is who may not be aware. And then when you landed there, what were you building and how were you thinking about people and community? And
it was a magical time. I tell you, that very first chamber I stepped into, and it was in a small community. It's a nonprofit organization, but it's a nonprofit business membership organization. It's like an association. Chambers and associations fall under the same legal status, and so it's a nonprofit. It's not a charity, though. So there's no charitable donations unless you also have a foundation. But it is a nonprofit. You're not taxed on your earnings. You report to a board of directors, but you exist for the community benefit. So with a Chamber of Commerce, you're bringing together a group of business owners and community leaders who are voluntarily paying dues to an organization, hopefully to accomplish things they can't accomplish on their own, things that will better the community, that will create a better quality of life, that will create a better environment for doing business in that community. And I, having run a small business, have been a member of that chamber, I really appreciated the work they did. But then when I stepped into the role and I saw, they also run a leadership development program and politics. They do policy and advocacy, and there's trips to Austin and trips to DC, and you're advocating at the city level, and you're trying to change things for good. And they would, this chamber ran events and it had a Christmas parade. Oh, that has some stories. And I got to hire Santa every year and set up his house on the courthouse square. I actually fired Santa one year because he was smoking and had to hire a new Santa.
That might be sacrilegious.
I tell you. So, but what an adventure, I ran a PRCA rodeo for that first chamber, and, put the wrong cow on a ad and got chewed out by some folks, but just learned. Just kept learning and learning and learning, and then had a column in a newspaper, and every step along the way it was like one new life experience after another. And so for me, for somebody who likes studying people, who likes learning, it was just this environment of just constant learning and constant growth, and lo and behold, I found out I was good at it. I was like, I do this well. People like what I'm doing. We're making more money now. So then another chamber called and said, hey, we've fired the CEO and we're kind of a mess. We heard you can turn them around. Can you come fix this? And then that became my thing for the next 30 years, was I would just get called by different organizations, successively bigger ones, saying, hey, will you come take a chance on us? And what a gift that was, just learning and growing. And it was something I didn't plan, but enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, it's a beautiful validation of the value you're bringing that you're getting invited into these roles. I mean, that's kind of the dream for, any individual out there seeking work, is like to be invited into something is a powerful endorsement. With the chamber, I didn't know about all those focuses and priorities. And so there's this diverse set of business stakeholders and probably stakeholders in the community as well. Right. How did you think, and maybe this is good advice for our leaders out there, how did you think about prioritization and focus with a lot of competing things, many different activities that the chamber was hosting, putting on, being part of?
This show is supported by Loyal Home Concierge. You can take a company public, but you just found a scorpion in the guest room. Welcome to Austin. We'll handle it. LoyalHomeConcierge.com.
Yeah, what did that look like?
Yeah. So when I would enter an organization, strategy and planning was like really the first step. I mean, if there were lots of staff involved, the first thing was really getting the people aligned, getting your team together. But once you consolidated that, then and got the finances, kind of at least knew where you were and what you had to deal with, it was really making sure you had the right strategy, the right mission, vision, values, and setting a plan. Like we're here now. Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? And then you kind of work backwards. And that involves all the traditional strategy sessions, the SWOT analysis, the figuring out your strengths and weaknesses, your going in and really prioritizing what are the top things you're going to work on in the next year, and what are the things you're going to focus on that are going to get you closer to that goal. And so it's not really rocket science, but it's amazing to me how many small businesses don't do this. I mean, I think the statistics are 80% of small businesses don't have a plan. Their plan is they put a budget together, and that's not a plan. That's kind of a wish and a hope. But like to go, this is where I want to get. So this is what I need to do to get there. Therefore, this is what needs to happen the next 3 years for me to get to where I want to go. So this is what needs to happen next year. So these are the steps I need to take that month. And I mean, I think that started for me without reading books on setting strategy. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, like begin with the end in mind. You get that set, you come backward. And then over the years, I got better at strategy, which is good because I got to increasingly larger, more complicated organizations with more difficult problems to solve for in bigger communities. And I needed to get better at it. And I think, and also the literature and the work around that just kept improving. So, and I got to watch other people. Yeah, I'm a people watcher. So I would hire great strategic planning folks that I met along the way and bring them into the community with me to help me do that. So
I really appreciate that intentionality as a leader, and some wording you used, which I really like, is getting the people aligned as a first step. And yeah, I think that's a powerful and important reminder for any leader out there. And then what followed is you shared that we want to talk about the mission, the vision, and the values, and develop that with the people. And I think that advice is really applicable to any community.
Absolutely.
It could even be a group of friends.
Absolutely.
But if a group of friends get together and say, hey, what are we about? And they get that alignment, how do we want to show up in the world? How do we want to show up in our friendships? Then it's way more powerful, enriching, fulfilling, connective. The outpouring of that and the fruit of it can just be so much more powerful. So I love that you're starting with that. Absolutely. In a quite intentional way.
Well, and I think as leaders, so often I will see someone step into an organization as leader and they establish what the mission is, and they establish the vision, and they lay out the strategy, and then they tell their people what it is. And I never took that approach. I truly believe you have to get the buy-in, so everyone has to be a part of it. I never took the approach of it's my job to create the strategy. I may have a strategy. I may have thought this through, and I may know exactly where I think we need to go, but I'm going to involve everyone in the process, and they may change my mind as we go through the process, but we're going to come up with this collective plan, because one of my best sayings that anybody's ever worked for me has heard this ad nauseum is, if they write it, they will underwrite it. If you want your board of directors in the community to support whatever it is you're doing, you want them to be a part of coming up with the plan in the first place. So, and if you want your people to fully support it and be all in on it, they have to own it. It has to be their plan. It's not your plan that you told them to do.
Absolutely. Give them some skin in the game. And I think, think about a community in the workplace, communities, it's not a dictatorship, it's collaborative.
That's right.
Inherently and by nature. And I love bringing people apart to participate in and be part of that strategic process that's so defining, so shaping, so critical in determining the trajectory.
Yeah. And when you're doing that, you're changing things. At our C12, that's what I lead is C12 groups. And this month we talked about change management. One of the things we talked about is, often business leaders think of change as a process. It's the steps I'm going to take, the processes we have to put in place. All that's really important, but ultimately the change occurs within the people. And the process is really the mechanism and the way we measure, but it's the people that have to change, and that's a whole range of emotions. And people are all different. They come from different places. They have different fears. They have different reasons why change is uncomfortable for them. And most of the population is opposed to change inherently. So, for self-protection, because they are worried about the people around them, because they are concerned that the processes they understand are now changing and they won't be able to function in the new system. And so you have to bring the people along and understand that they're going through this emotional journey and there's fear involved, and you've got to walk with them in that, or the change isn't going to happen. They can say yes to you to your face, but they're going to undermine you behind your back. The only way it really happens is when they finally buy in.
You touched on something that I think is an incredible challenge for leaders and community builders out there, is that each of us is changing and experiencing our own transformation quite differently.
That's right.
And so as a leader, how do you approach that when you've got maybe a big group of folks? Like, how do you be sensitive to that, facilitate that positively? Like, how do you move when everyone around you and that you're leading is maybe transforming or changing differently or growing differently?
Well, I got better at it. So I started out with small teams, and I have to admit I started this process more like a bulldozer. In fact, I had a horrible saying I used to use all the time: if it's not broke, let's break it. And, because I did know that I was stepping into an organization that was broken, and I probably needed to shake things up a lot. But, and that's effective to a point. But the fallacy there is that while people may change for a while because you're in power, if you don't really effectively change them fundamentally and where it's headed, as soon as you leave, it will revert back to the way it was. And there's nothing more disheartening than watching something you've built up just roll back really quickly within 3 to 6 months because you hadn't set the right foundation. And so learning that you have to move the people and work with the people and get them to change and adopt. And so it's hard, it's messy, it's not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. It requires a lot of humility, lots of communication, overly communicating, listening, hearing what they have to say, helping people work through things. I mean, none of it's really easy, but it's absolutely important to be effective. And I think right now, with all the changes going on in the world, in addition to whatever changes, I took a poll of members the other day at a forum and asked how many changes and had all these different categories of changes has your company experienced in the last 6 months? And when they were sitting there writing it all down, and then they were reporting their nose back, and they were just like, no wonder people are going crazy. I mean, we've done a lot. And I'm like, every one of these is massive. I mean, it's like laying a patient on the table and saying, well, we need to cut that arm off, and let's do a nose job while we're there, and let's do a tummy tuck, and you've had some issues with that knee, and maybe we can just pull that nasty gallbladder out, and I mean, all at one time. I mean, it probably killed the patient, but that's what we keep doing.
That's a very accurate description, probably of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And you're making me remember back to early days for me in my business, and I would get to the end of a week or the end of the month, and I would be so exhausted. And it was humble days, and at that time I didn't have a lot of revenue to show for it. I'm like, why am I so tired? And through the counsel and wisdom of an older, wiser mentor, it was just the context switching I was doing
Yeah.
of all these different things that I was working on, moving from, standard operating procedures back into sales and then into pouring into my people. And then,
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of that in your C12 world, and I'm excited to come back to that. But take us through, so you worked in several chambers and you kept being invited in. And I love that you were the turnaround exec. We hear about that in the private equity world a lot of turnaround CEO, but you were that for nonprofits, which I think is so cool. So where did you go to after the several chambers that you worked for?
Yeah, and I think that was the cool thing about that too, is it's business leaders that were inviting me in. So, they served on the boards and they saw in me something they understood from their own world. Somebody that understood the finances and understood strategy and understood people management and understood those things that they knew that organization needed next. So if I could sell that effectively to them in our first conversation, that was what they wanted, and that's where we went. I was at the Austin Chamber, and I got a call about Austin Habitat for Humanity, and what a gift and a blessing that was. I do remember stepping in there, and one of the board members that was interviewing me, I think I had 8 interviews to get a job that I didn't ask for, and so I had to remind him of that at some point and say, I'm going to lose the job I have for one I don't have yet, because you've called me in and you keep doing this, and I'm running out of excuses why I have to take another lunch. But they wanted to get it right, and they weren't in a great financial position at the time. They were running out of land. They had some large obligations, had moved into a new headquarters, had a lot of staff turnover. And so I knew it was going to be one of my biggest challenges yet, but I also knew it was a huge opportunity. It was a huge issue in the community, housing. It was an incredible brand name, and so a great platform to work from. I hadn't had the opportunity to work in a charity other than a foundation I might have created within a chamber. And so to be able to actually, focus, I have to say my first December was amazing, because I was hired in November, and in December that people mail checks to you that you haven't asked for. And there was money coming in the mail. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. In the chamber world, you have to ask for memberships annually. And there was a joke, it was like selling air, and so it was hard to quantify or explain, the value, even though you might know it's there. It was a harder thing to communicate, and people didn't have to do it, but they didn't have to do this either. But the checks we're getting, we didn't ask for, and they were much bigger. And so that was I think my best Christmas ever was just constant. Every day finding out, I would run to the front and watch them open up the mail, and I just couldn't believe the money coming in. But to take an organization like that and be able to figure out like how do I take everything I've ever learned and then some, and how do I keep learning, and how do I figure out how to help them take advantage of everything that they're capable of doing. And so it was just a great learning platform, a great place to try new things, a great place to work with a team of incredible professionals. And so, it was a real joy, and it's doing great. They've got great leadership now, and I'm just so thankful I got to be a part of that.
Well, what an amazing organization. I think everyone tuning into this episode will know the Habitat brand has maybe worked on a project, and it's very like-minded to how we love to serve here in Austin. Mm-hmm. So I imagine, being the purposeful person that you are, that you came into Habitat, you had, worked on your mission statement, you worked on getting the people aligned, mission, vision, values.
It's 3:14 a.m. That sound, it's water. Do you A, wake up your husband and start a fight, or B, call the one number that handles it all while you go back to sleep?
Loyal Home Concierge. We're awake, so you don't have to be.
What came after that, and what were some of, double click into that experience of what were you prioritizing during that time with Habitat? Where were you seeing potential that you wanted to grow? Yeah. Where were you seeing a need for new things? What did the brass tacks look like?
Yeah, so the really cool thing was what I realized Habitat had that, chambers have a certain brand, but there's also a stigma. They've been around over 100 years. They've been around a long time, and so there's just people either used to think it was the place you went to get your map, or it's a place you go when you're bringing a new business to town or whatever. So getting people to understand that was one thing. Going into a place that has this wonderful brand recognition but isn't very well known in the community, and for me, I just saw it as a huge opportunity. I've always had kind of a backwards approach. Is like, if I'm going to turn around a nonprofit, the worse off it is right now, the better it's going to look when I fix it. So, so I was like, oh, it's messed up. Great. Let's jump in. And so I stepped in and I was like, one, it has a huge brand and we're not taking advantage of it. One thing I had learned in the chamber world was the value of policy and advocacy. And I really felt like we underplayed that hand a bit, like that, the chance to actually impact policy. We could actually cause more houses to get built by better housing policy than we could ever affect by building with sticks. And so that was a huge focus. Another huge focus was land, but to get land, it was getting more and more expensive. I mean, there was a time when Habitat would get free land or very cheap land and build houses on it that were less expensive. Housing has gotten more expensive, the rules and regulations and what you have to put in. I mean, many places, you have to put in a garage and you have to put in this. Every one of those things costs more money. So it tacks on to the cost of each individual house. And so thinking through that and going, okay, housing costs are getting bigger, land's getting bigger, so we got to have more money. And we were running out of land. So that's a problem. Like, what do you do when you don't have money and you don't have land, which is expensive, and housing is increasing? So we went on an aggressive fundraising campaign. One of our strategies was to expand our restores. We had one of the first restore in the nation and the top performing. And
tell folks what that is if they're not familiar.
Yeah, so Habitat for Humanity has restores, which are a place they primarily sell used building materials, but they've expanded to sell other used and donated items. And so it's basically a retail operation, retails to support the construction and the land development and all the work that we need to do. And so to have a for-profit entity within a nonprofit that's generating income was a very sustainable pitch that I could go out into the business community and say, I don't need you to give me $100,000 to build one house. I need you to give me $500,000 for building more restores so I can produce the money every year to build houses. And so that was a very appealing strategy that helped us start getting our land acquisition on a roll. Another was just partnerships. Like, there's a lot of entities out there that want to partner, so we just became very collaborative and looked for opportunities to partner and co-develop land that already exists and that could be developed for housing. And policy, we worked on getting policy passed that would enable us to build more houses. And then we worked on a subsidiary we had called Homebase, which was kind of laying dormant, but it worked with for-profit developers. And we're like, how can we take that and make it more effective so that we can help the private sector build more housing? And so again, it was like, the legs of a stool, like let's build more housing, let's get more stores in place, build more housing, get more land. Let's partner with builders and developers and help them sell more affordable housing. If they'll do 10% affordable housing, we can be their salespeople. We even established our nonprofit as a brokerage firm, so it could actually list the projects and sell them. That was a process to figure that out and get that done. And then we had the policy arm where we were doing advocacy at the local, federal, and state levels, and just trying to get more housing built across the board. And just with all of that, we could see much greater impact than we could have ever just built our way out. But, over time, because we were in all those places and we were seeing more, and, the thing I wanted to, every time I said, if there's an affordable housing discussion, we need to be in the discussion. And my heart would break. There'd be a story in the Statesman and they'd have all these people quoted and nobody from Habitat was quoted. And I remember inviting Mayor Adler into a board meeting my first year there. I might have been in there 4 months. And he came And he told us we were basically ineffective and irrelevant, which was hard for the board to hear. But I needed them to hear it from somebody in an authoritative position. And he's like, you need to do more. You have too big of a brand to have wasted. And I'm like, okay, I've only been here 4 months, but you give us some time. When I left Habitat, he gave me a key to the city. So, which was just a lovely gesture to say, you've come a long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I so admire just all the strategy and thoughtfulness that went into seeing where there was existing value with Habitat, seeing what your force multipliers were, seeing where leverage was, and seeing where and what activities would yield the most impact, like really thinking downstream. And also what I'm hearing is that you were really using the power of community,
absolutely,
bringing that in to magnify and multiply the impact, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. And we made our mistakes. No, you can't move things forward and change things without making mistakes. And so I would be the first to admit when we stepped into something or made a mistake or like this did not work, obviously, because I wanted our team to be able to make mistakes as well and be willing to do it. I mean, we tried online sales and
from the Restore.
We experimented with that for 1.5 years before COVID hit. And I remember Habitat International telling me I couldn't do it because I was competing with other habitats across the country in fundraising, which was banned. And I'm like, I'm competing with Home Depot. I'm not competing with other habitats. Unless they're online and great for them, then yeah, we'll go head to head and compete. But I was trying to figure out if we could do that effectively. And it was, I don't know that they're even still doing it. It wasn't as effective a strategy as we had hoped for. It's really hard to turn around donated goods because they're not, you don't get them in volume. And so it's hard. You're just constantly listing individual things for sale and you're paying somebody a salary to do it. And, it's just really hard to make that. I brought in really smart people on the board that had done some just amazing stuff in this space. And even they were like, I just don't know how to make any more money. They were just like, you're going to just start selling things that you can sell multiples of. And I mean, that's not how donations work typically. So, but it about saved us during COVID to have it online. And it was funny because then Habitat International called and said, will you help other people figure out how to do this online thing?
Came back around.
The very thing they told us not to do. Yeah. And like, yeah, sure, we'd be happy to. But but it was something that we really gave we tried really hard to make that work. And we tried building playhouses when we didn't have enough land to build houses on, and we had volunteers, and the only way you get the volunteers to give you money is if they have something to do. So San Francisco was building playhouses, so we tried it. It wasn't super successful. I mean, it made some money. It got us through a tough time. But the construction guys hated it. I mean, it's like they don't want to build playhouses. They want to build houses, It's a harder sell. We're selling playhouses as opposed to we're building a house for a person. Yes, it will fund an eventual house. It just didn't have the same resonance. It didn't go over as well. But, we tried it. We tried a lot of things. But, underlying it, there was always a strategy of this was our North Star. This is what we want to be. This is what we want to do. We want to get to 50 homes a year. We're only doing 10 now. We want to have effective public policy. We want to be the voice of housing in the community. We want to be the first one they call when there's an issue, so we can stand up and advocate for it. We want businesses and developers to call us when they're doing a project, so we can partner with them. And we knew if we could do those things, and if we could create a portfolio of products that looked different than what people expected, that we would get invited into more spaces, we would get to build more different product. But, every time we did that, it was a leap of faith to step into a space we'd never been in before. Well, it was a great season. I got to experiment with a lot of strategy there.
Admire the boldness of charting a lot of new territory with that organization, and definitely encourage that folks check out Habitat and the work locally. There's so many unseen housing needs in the city of Austin.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate the work Habitat does. There are other orgs like Cornerstone Restoration that we work with that are coming alongside folks that either don't have housing or have unsafe homes. And so encourage our listeners and viewers to check those out.
Yeah.
I'm excited now to jump into your world currently with C12. So you're a leader and you're pouring into other leaders.
Yeah.
Tell us what C12 is and what that world looks like.
So when I got to Habitat, I kind of roll back a little bit. I knew as I interviewed for that position, and board members asked me, "You've been a CPA, you've led chambers of commerce. What makes you qualified to do this?" I mean, the same ones that called me and asked me to interview for the job, but yes, they were asking me a very legitimate question, like, "What makes you qualified?" And I said, "Well, I've assessed it. And I don't think anybody's going to be qualified to do this because unless you've led another one, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you've done it well. I don't know that anybody is fully qualified, but I understand the fundamentals of leading an organization, and I have led a nonprofit, and I have fundraised, and I know real estate, and I know finances, and I'll figure the rest out. But I will surround myself with smart people. And so I will find a CEO peer advisory group. And besides our board of directors, I'm going to have another board that I sit with every month and learn from. And so I laid that out in the interview early on because I didn't want to have a question about it later when it was time to, hey, like, we're not paying for what? And they, you know, they're CEOs, they're leaders, they're business owners. Many of them have done things like that. So they were like, well, yeah, that's a good idea. That makes sense. And so they accepted that. So I kind of laid my own groundwork for that. And then I discovered in that process, C12. And so it's for Christian CEOs and business owners. I thought, great. And we're a faith-based organization. Not that you have to have a faith-based organization to be in Habitat, but I mean, to be in C12. But the whole idea is that you're being intentional about your faith and bringing it into the workplace. And I did want to do that, and I wanted to do it better. So I entered, I was a member, and it was actually my own C12 forum that suggested I consider being a chair when I decided to exit Habitat.
Invited in yet again. I love it.
Yeah, they were like, yes, that's what you should do. And I was like, really? So, I prayed about it, decided that was it. And so C12 it's created so that it's hard for leaders to lead alone. When you're at the top of an organization, when you're CEO or the business owner, typically we get so far by the industry knowledge that cost us to build the organization. We're a great architect, or we're a great engineer, or we're a great whatever firm, but do we know really how to lead a company and lead people? And do we have all those other disciplines that are going to help us get really to where we're capable of being? Or are we going to be stuck at this level, like we've gotten this far with word of mouth and with what we know? And then there tends to be that ceiling that people hit. And then there's just that loneliness factor of you have people issues and you have this kind of issue, trying to get your money collected, all kinds of things that people, strategy issues, and nobody to talk to about it. So the power of being in a group and being able not just continuous learning, which I love, continuously approaching new subjects and learning, but then learning from each other and giving each other advice, and then having a seasoned leader leading and facilitating is just a powerful way for people to grow. It's just this intentional, I called it my business Sabbath, my one day a month where I stepped out of the business and had an out of office message, and if it was an emergency, my team could reach out, but they knew that was my day away to focus on the business and on myself and figuring out, getting inspired. I don't get inspired just by showing up doing the same thing every day. I have to step away. I have to go somewhere. I have to hear from other people and get new ideas. And also just, there's power in looking outside your own industry. I think so many people think, well, I want to be successful in tech. I need to surround myself with tech people, or I want to be successful in whatever. I want to surround myself with people that do what I do. But often there's biases within your industry that prevent you from solving certain problems. And so when you get in a room with 11 other people who run completely different organizations, you can be so fully transparent with each other because there's no one competing with you in that room. And a lot of times, like, the other industry has figured out the problem you haven't figured out yet. They just use different language around it. So you're sitting here going, oh, I can do that here. I just change it up a little bit. And so that to me was super powerful as a as leader of an organization, and now to be in a space of being able to help others and see them growing. And it's just the biggest honor of my life to get to do this.
Okay, the stonemason sent a PDF. The plumber wants a check. Wait, who is Dave on Venmo? Is that the woodworker or the tool rental? Oh my gosh. Stop playing forensic accountant with your own renovation. With Loyal, you get one consolidated invoice. We manage the vendors and the paperwork. One bill, zero confusion. Loyal Home Concierge.
That's awesome. And that's, as an entrepreneur, that is much needed. And you laid out, I could call some fundamental truths and pillars of community in general. Having a diverse set of perspectives and backgrounds is enriching. It's very positive to a community. I love the encouragement of don't go it alone. And I would just share that with anybody in any domain or season of life. Don't go it alone.
That's right.
Whether you're a new mother, a new father, or you've just started college and you're trying to figure out how to be a college student, or you're in a new career path, don't go it alone. There's always people you can surround yourself with. That's right. And I think something that I appreciate the thoughtfulness of C12 is how can we bring together a group of people where the environment facilitates transparency?
Yeah.
Because to have really close, rich community that is a guiding light in how you're leading, that is life-giving, ideally you can be very raw and real.
Yeah.
And so I think that, thoughtfulness and allowing that for folks or enabling that is so critical.
It requires intentionality. And I have found that for me to inspire them to be transparent, I have to be transparent and vulnerable as well. And so I don't want to monopolize conversations, but I'm not going to hesitate to lay my junk on the table as well, because if I don't, they're going to have this twisted view that I have all the answers, which I don't. But then it just creates a space where they're comfortable opening up about things that they need to open up with. And I'm always surprised and impressed at how quickly people jump in. I mean, I will have people by the end of their first meeting as a guest telling the room things that I didn't think they would say at the beginning of the day that they're struggling with, or they're, and everyone's got stuff they're struggling with, and there's things they use for coping that aren't healthy, and there's relationships that are broken, and there's things that need to be addressed that they're just kind of masking or putting to the side. And it's a space of growth. I continuously see so much transformation in the people that choose to do it, and so I'm so thankful for that. But everybody doesn't want that. I mean, I do have, sometimes I'll have a guest and it's just, you can just tell they're just like, I'm just not going to be that transparent. I can't do this. But, I hope someday they do. I find that it's just like, there's nothing more powerful than being with a group of people that love you and care about you and want you to grow, and that will walk alongside you and cheer for you. And, the beauty of C12 is, they'll pray for you. I mean, we have text threads, and something's going on in someone's life, and everybody's jumping in and supporting because we care. That's beautiful. And yeah, it can be a lonely road as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So providing that type of backing, support, community is incredible. I remember I did a similar peer group with other business leaders, and in my first month, I had something I was really struggling with in my business, and I was very bashful about sharing it. And I a little bit begrudgingly brought it up, and I was fearing judgment. Yeah. And my business was less mature than a lot of the entrepreneurs in the room, so I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I even struggling with this? And after I brought it up, the facilitator said, hey, raise your hand in the room if you've struggled with what Austin is talking about. And 80% of the hands went up, and I was like, oh my gosh. I'm seen.
Yeah, I'm seen, and oh wow, I feel understood. And like, oh man, now I know that there's wisdom in the room I can glean from, of like people have been through this gauntlet before.
Yeah.
So it's so cool that that's, it sounds like a regular thing in C12 culture.
Yeah, it is. And, there are several just pillars that we just rest on. One is do is greater than talk. Like, we're not going to allow somebody to just talk about what they're going to do and then the next month come back with the same problem and talk about what they're going to do. Like we will push in on them. There's accountability. I think part of one of these forums, the value of these things is that people truly hold you accountable. But it's hard for them to hold you accountable for the right things if they don't know what's going on. So that's kind of where the vulnerability comes in. But that's where transformation happens. That combination of vulnerability and accountability.
You referenced, alongside talking about your C12 leadership experience, you talked about stepping away regularly to have time to yourself, to reflect and recharge. And is there anything else that's filling your cup right now in this season of life? And also, is there anything particular to the city of Austin that's fun for you, kind of as a reset for you? Maybe it's a place or an area of town that you like, or an activity unique to Austin?
That's awesome. I do find rest and retreat is one of the values that we actually rate ourselves on every month. We have this balance wheel of life that they have to grade themselves on, and it's everything: your faith and your family and your marriage and your walk with God and your biblical community and your health and your fitness and your nutrition. And there's always something down for people. I mean, there's always something that's getting neglected, and usually several somethings. And retreat is probably one of the biggest ones. And I don't mean retreat like going on a guy's fishing trip. That's, or golfing. That's not retreat. I mean, quiet time away from everything to really reflect and think and be alone. And for me, to be, with God and to hear from him. And for years I was really good at praying to him, but it doesn't really help if you don't listen to what he has to say, and you can't hear him if you stay busy all the time. So turning everything off and just taking that time. And I went through a struggle starting to build my C12 practice. It didn't go well at first. I had a lot of learning. My first year was tough, be honest, but I came through that and learned so much, and kind of figured out I was the project. I thought I was there to help other people, and I think I was the one getting worked on. But I learned a lot through that. And one of the things I started doing was taking a quarterly retreat day, which then I changed to a monthly retreat day, and I'm still doing it. And I tell you, it's easier to do a retreat day when things aren't going well and you have all the time on your hands. When it starts getting busy and success happens, it's easier to say, hey, I'm good. Lot going on. I just really can't. I should take one more meeting this week. I probably should eat in on this day or move this day or whatever. But I have held those days this year, even though things are going well. And they're so critical because they are a time of reset. They're a time where everything slows down enough that I can get out of my own head and really hear, really think clearly. And I come out of those just with a better attitude and frame of mind to attack the next month. I think if I just kept going at the pace I tend to go without taking those regularly scheduled retreats, I would burn myself into the ground. And I have done it too many times in my life, more than I want to admit. Just go and go and go until there's nothing left. And then, sometimes that next job offer, while I had already turned the organization around, part of it was a relief that I am tired. And I'll actually have 2 weeks off before this next thing starts. It's just not, looking back, not wise at all. And so, part of me being a C12 is to help other people not make some of the mistakes I've made in life. Part of mine was not taking enough retreat days. And so I need to lead by example. I need to be an example of the things that we promote. So I show up and I take that time and I report in on it. And it has kept me sane, and I think it's just foundational to where I'm at right now. It fills my cup. Yeah.
And I think, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or anywhere on the social relational spectrum, get time by yourself.
It's
Slow down. It can be uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable for people that like to go, go, go. It is hard for them. And I will tell you, the first few hours of the first time I ever did it were painful. I was just like, I wanted to grab for a phone. I wanted to turn something on. I just like, the silence was killing me, and it was the best thing I've done. And so now I look forward to them and, that time, and I can right now just kind of envision how it's going to feel the next time we do it. But it is hard at first. You have to push, again, it's another time. You have to push through the pain. We've conditioned ourselves to just be surrounded by sound and noise and activity all the time, and just taking that time. You asked what I like doing. That is what fills my cup. But we've moved out to Wimberley, so we live out on 7 acres now, and I have a chainsaw, and I love to cut down cedar and then drag it across the property and then burn it. That sounds a little scary. But there's just something very physical about it. The fire is, I don't know, it's soothing. I'm not doing it right now. Just announce, I know it's very dry. We're not having fires out in Wimberley right now. I have to wait for a while for some good rain going. But that is something that I find it to be a peaceful place that just allows me, because I fill up my days so much with people that I need spaces like that and time where I'm just like getting everything out of my system and sweating it out and just really enjoying nature. And so I just have this absurd fascination with chainsaws. And we have 7 acres. There's plenty of cedar to cut. Trust me.
Man, I might need to get out there and provide a hand. I love that combination. And that's recharging for me too. You're in nature, you're doing something physically demanding. It's kind of more of a rote task versus something you're thinking really intensely about.
That's right.
And I love that. And for people that don't know Central Texas, cedar's everywhere, and it's not going away. And so there's plenty of cedar to cut
Plenty
down.
of cedar. You can keep burning it and cutting it. It just keeps growing back. I have this dream. We're just going to get down to the oaks. But if not, I'm just going to have a great time cutting down cedar and burning it for a long time. So that's good.
Well, as we wind down our time together, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Anything you want to leave the audience with, or any ways to get in touch with you or C12?
Absolutely. I am on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people, would love to connect with anybody. Just look up Phyllis Snodgrass on LinkedIn, and would love to connect. If anyone is interested in learning more about C12 and about CEO peer groups in general, even if this isn't a fit for you, perhaps if it's not, I don't try to sell anybody on C12. I just try to figure out where they're at and see if this is a next step they want to take. If they're interested, I invite them, and they're qualified, I will invite them to attend a meeting as a guest and experience it. And then if they are interested, then we go to another step. I do have an info lunch coming up soon, and I do those like every other month. So there's always an opportunity for one of those. But if anybody does reach out to me and is interested in learning more about C12, I would love to share with them a book that I love. It's Jordan Rayner's book, The Sacredness of Secular Work, and really talks about the value of work, and that it's a beautiful thing, that God actually gave it to us as a gift. And we've kind of corrupted it a bit, but it is beautiful by design. It's our intention. And so our work can be worship, and it should be. And so how do we approach our work in this healthy perspective? And so I would love to give that away to anybody that's interested.
Appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for the time today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together. If this conversation sparked something in you, a new idea, a feeling of connection, or just a good laugh, pass it on. Share this episode with a fellow Austinite or a loved one who needs to hear it. Let's keep weaving this fabric of community together. This show is proudly presented by Loyal Home Concierge. At Loyal, we believe that a healthy, thriving city starts within the four walls of your home. We are passionate about supporting overextended executives, the moms and dads who do it all, and the couples who take life by storm. Because we know that when your home life is supported, you are free to support the ones who matter most.
Your kids, your wife.
Whether you need a proactive manager for your home or a creative problem solver for your next big adventure, we are here to help you design a life of intention. LoyalHomeConcierge.com. Let's make life a little more beautiful together. Stay loyal to your community, and we'll see you next time.